Hi everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. So wherever time zone you are, thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Nalini Yelumalai. I'm the Malaysia Program Officer at Article 19, based in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. And this event, the press briefing today, is co-organized by Access Now and Article 19. So basically, we are here to discuss and to get some overview on what's happening in Malaysia in regards to freedom of expression online. Our title today is New Government, Old Tactics, Laws, Abuse to Throttle Online Expression in Malaysia. This event will be recorded and will made available in YouTube. So we can share the link later. And we also have prepared a press statement for today, and that will be shared shortly for your attention. So you can actually make use of for your reporting with additional information from the speakers later. And we have really good, excellent speaker from Malaysia to join us to talk about the issues of freedom of expression in Malaysia. I would like to introduce very, very briefly all the speakers, and I'll pass to each and every one of them to give more detailed background about them. So our first speaker on our list is Ms. Watsala Naidu. So Watsala is the Executive Director of Center for Independent Journalism in Malaysia. The second would be Mr. Edmund Bond, lawyer at Ahmed Bond Advocates, former IHR Malaysia representative. Mr. Stephen Gunn, editor-in-chief and co-founder of Malaysia Kini. And finally, Mr. Fahmi Reza, activist and artist. So I would like to give this floor to Ms. Watsala to give a very general overview of the state of freedom of expression and political situation in Malaysia. Watsala, over to you.
Yes, thank you, Nalini. And hello to my fellow panelists, members of the press, and friends who are joining us virtually today. And thank you as well to the organizers for having me join the briefing today. My organization, the Center for Independent Journalism, is a civil society organization as well as a media watchdog. And our work is grounded in promoting freedom of expression, right to information, and free media. So in that context, what I would share with everyone today is a snapshot of the freedom of expression landscape in Malaysia. And of course, this is located within the context of our continuing political turmoil, as well as COVID-19. In 2019, following the last or the 14th general election, which actually resulted in the opposition coalition Pakatan Harapan coming into power, we saw more of an opening of space and also some level of cautious optimism, I would say, with regards to our path towards reform. Yeah, this, of course, all changed, at the end of February 2020, where through rather, I would say, unprecedented machinations, known here in Malaysia, and I think even now globally as the Sheraton move, we entered into a political turmoil, which has resulted in a new government and a new coalition led by Prime Minister Muhyiddin Yassin. Now, this new government, formed through precarious alliances, has resulted in a situation where the government is attempting to prop up its positions by stifling criticism and dissent. And this is what we are seeing. And on top of that, the government has used the COVID-19 pandemic to justify the very severe measures that it has been adopting, the crackdowns, the intimidation, the harassments that we have seen. Yeah. And one of the most severe measure, I would say, is the actual proclamation of an emergency on 11th of January 2021 this year, right? Which has in fact suspended Parliament and has also empowered the Prime Minister to enact ordinances which circumvents parliamentary debates. What we have seen now, amongst the few ordinances which has been enacted, is the enactment of the emergency ordinance number 2, which came into effect on the 12th of March 2021, and which is actually intended to criminalize fake news, relating to COVID-19 and or the emergency proclamation. So this is now has set the landscape, the environment, to curb freedom of expression and speech. Being in this perpetual lockdown, in some different forms of lockdown since March 2020, what we have seen is a larger constituent or larger number of people moving towards online spaces for communications, for exchange of ideas, imparting or seeking information. This then is a backdrop that has also set the trend and the pattern, or rather the prevalence that we see in the course of the last, let's say 15 months or so, of silencing dissent, various forms of expression. And this is actually to a large extent escalating, because it's not just civil society, human rights defenders or media, or there are also attacks against gender-based expressions, attacks and use of religion to undermine freedom of expression. I'm sure my other panelists will also share more of specific incidences. So this is just to give a framework. I'm happy to respond to more questions later. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Wachla. I will now move on to Edmund.
Thank you, Nalini. Article 19, RightsCon access now. Malaysia still labors under laws curtailing freedom of speech and expression, and we still have the colonial legacy in the Sedition Act that allows for prosecution on statements against the royalty and government. The Communications and Multimedia Act penalizes annoying and offensive posts on the internet. Fahmi Reza's experience is an example. The Printing Presses Publications Act regulates print media and books. The Home Minister has the absolute discretion to ban books it deems unfit for public consumption on the basis of national security and public order. The courts still rely on an archaic contempt of court law that penalizes or is used purportedly to protect its dignity and its institution. And Stephen from Malaysia Kini will elaborate on that example. But tellingly, the most controversial enactment recently has been the emergence of the fake news ordinance under the emergency laws. It reenacts a law that was actually repealed by the previous Pakatan Harapan government, and it's now been revived under the pretext of protecting or promoting the fight against COVID-19 in an emergency. There are at least 5 main objections against this fake news ordinance. One, it is too broad. Any information regarding COVID, any information regarding the emergency may be deemed as news that is fake and punishable under the law. Two, anyone can go to court on an ex parte basis in the absence of the other party to have the court order remove that piece of news that is purportedly fake. So you go to court without a challenge for the piece of news that is on the website. And three, if the applicant goes to court to seek that the article be removed, you cannot challenge it. No one can come to court and say, look, that order to remove is wrong. For the fine and jail penalty goes up to 100,000 ringgit and up to 6 years imprisonment. That's excessive. 5, any news portal or social media platform or third-party commentators, intermediaries, can also be liable under this law, and this is overly broad and is unproportionate or disproportionate and goes against any principle that we know of under international human rights law. Thank you.
Thank you, Edmund. Thank you so much for sharing that. I pass to Stephen to share his experience as Malaysia Kini has been prosecuted lately for the third-party comments on the news site. Stephen, over to you.
Thank you, Nalini. fellow panelists and fellow journalists. I'm the editor-in-chief of Malaysia Kini, and also the co-founder, which is a social political website, news website in Malaysia. We've been around for more than 20 years. Malaysia Kini went live a year after Google was launched. I think while we're not as successful as Google, we are one of the few startups that have done pretty well, I think, in this part of the world. We are a subscription-based website, and our income rely mostly on the support of our supporters and our readers. Now, working in an environment which is particularly hostile for media organizations like Malaysia Kini has not been easy for all of us, but somehow we're able to survive through the years. We've been raided by the police. Well, last time I checked, it's about 5 times over the years, arrested a number of times as well. And we faced debilitating cyber attacks and the like. The latest was the contempt of court charge against Malaysia Kini, where we were fined a hefty $500,000 ringgit. That's about 120,000 US dollars. But thank goodness the amount was we are able to thankfully able to raise through crowdfunding within a few hours. Now that charge was based on comments that was made by our subscribers in our comment page, comment section, and apparently some of the comments were critical of the judiciary. The judges were not happy about that. It went straight to the federal court, which is the highest court in the country. So there is actually no recourse for appeal, and we were found guilty of that. We were given a few days, I think 3 days, to pay that fine. And if we were not able to raise that money, we would have problems continuing our reporting. So I think basically I consider that perhaps an attempt to also to stop us from continuing on. And there've been other cases of attempt of harassment and all that. Thankfully, again, we were able to survive that. Now, the many restrictive laws that we face in Malaysia definitely do impede our work. But I guess, however difficult the situation is, it does not stop us from continuing our to carry out our task, which is to tell the truth to power and to hold power to account. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Steven. I think all of you really sticking into the time frame that was given. Very well done on that. And Fahmi, over to you now. And Fahmi has a presentation. So Fahmi.
Thank you, Nalini. Okay, let me play my slides. Okay, my name is Fahmi Reza, and I'm a political graphic designer based in Kuala Lumpur. And I've been, for the past 20 years, I've been producing hundreds, thousands of political posters and graphics on different social issues. On the screen right now, I just posters that I produced this year so far. Back in 2016, I was charged in court for one of my graphics, a clown caricature of the previous Prime Minister Najib Razak, criticizing him as a way to protest against his involvement in the 1MDB corruption scandal. And in 2018, I was sentenced to prison and 30,000 ringgit fine over the caricature under the country's Section 233 of the Communications and Multimedia Act, our country's multimedia and internet law. I continue to use my graphics as a way to comment, as a commentary, as a social and political commentary on daily issues, and also as a way to protest against the current government, Perikatan Nasional government. last year, I came up with this parody, satirical, missing poster of the health minister. We have a big cabinet with underperforming ministers. So yeah, I use my graphics as a way to criticize and make fun of them. And I also did another parody of a coupon code where ministers get a discount for quarantine after they came back from overseas. And because of these two posters, I was called in by the police in March this year. So I was there was 2 investigation papers open against me, again under the country's Internet Law, Communications and Multimedia Act, and also they also used another law investigating me for criminal defamation for both satirical graphics. In April, I came up with this satirical Spotify playlist called "This is Dengkike." Dengkike means are you jealous or envious? That featured the portrait of our country's queen. So it's an actual playlist with 100 songs with the word jealousy in it. 100 jealous songs, all in one playlist. And I posted it on my Facebook, and I got arrested. The government sent 20 police officers, to my house. They kicked a hole through my door, forced themselves in, handcuffed me, brought me to the police station, and I was detained in the police lockup overnight for 24 hours over this Spotify playlist. And again, I was arrested under the Communications and Multimedia Act and also under the country's Sedition Act. And that's not it. So I came up with this satirical or parody of a university master's degree certificate, for our Minister of Communications, who is also, it's basically to criticize this culture of party hopping. So we call them frogs, kata. So I came up with this fictitious National Frog University and awarded our minister a master of party hopping. And I also came up with a logo for this fictitious university. And the university, people lodged police report against me. So this is one, and this is another caricature of the health minister, and people lodged police report against me, and I was called in again for questioning last month. Again, they're using the Communications and Multimedia Act over all these different postings. All my graphics I post on my social media accounts on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And so this year alone, I've been arrested once, and currently there are 5 investigation papers. I've been called in by the police 5 times so far, and I spent one night in lockup over my political graphic satire. So I think that is what's happening with me right now. Thank you. Back to you, Nalini.
Thank you so much, Fahmi. Thank you, everyone, for covering the first round of discussion on giving a little bit of background. But your struggle, your issues, and also overview on political situation and freedom of expression in Malaysia. I'm just going to be more specific on issues that has been raised by all of you in the discussion just now. So I'm going to go first to Wachlap. Malaysia already had an anti-fake news in 2018. It was repealed by the Pakatan Harapan administration. And we say that it's quite problematic to have such a law in this country. But again, now we have fake news ordinance coming back again in Malaysia, and it's been already being used to charge and to investigate people for misinformation or fake news. Why do you think the fake news ordinance was passed again? And do you, in your opinion, do you think there's an opportunity or there's any chance for the government to repeal it as soon as possible?
Okay. Thank you for the question, Nalini. To contextualize it, when the first fake news act was adopted, it was to counter and silence critics by the just two governments before us. Yeah. And it was repealed, and I think that was one of the most progressive move made by the Pakatan Harapan government. But then if we bring it back to our current context, what we see is basically a government, it's like almost like a house of cards, right? Very shaky foundation that can collapse if shaken or questioned too much. So this ordinance is another manifestation, or rather a tool, to stop any attempts of critical questioning or challenging the authorities of the state. I mean, that's clearly what is being used, and it's being used against laypersons, the general public. If we look at the number of cases that's been investigated in the last couple of months, 21 odd cases have been investigated. I think almost 11 cases where they were probably charged as well. Now, so the avenues for repeal in the current context is rather tenuous, yeah, because it is a tool. It's not like any other legislation to serve a particular public interest. But the other opportunities, rather than us pushing for the repeal or creating campaigns for the repeal, what we are really focusing on is also to see how, at the end of the emergency proclamation, which is at the moment, meant to end in August, yeah, there is a possibility under our constitution where it shall cease to have effect 6 months after, the emergency proclamation ceases to be enforced. So that is one opportunity. But there is, concern that the avenues for repeals very, very limited because it's a political tool largely.
Great. Thank you so much, Watsla. Fahmi, I'm coming back to you on the same questions. What is your opinion on that? Why you think it has been bring back again?
Why? Maybe I want to share my problem with this fake news law. When I was charged and convicted in 2016 over Najib's caricature, the crime was actually, the charge sheet. Yeah, it says I was found guilty of creating and spreading online content that was false in nature, with the intention of hurting another person's feelings. And I think my main concern is that it is not clear how this fake news law will determine what is false. False news or false content. Yeah, and I fear it could easily be used to silence legitimate criticisms, against the government and works of political satire and parody, that the government does not like. So that it could easily be used against me again.
Yeah, thank you, Fahmi, for sharing that. And I think maybe that's one of the main purpose. Coming back to the human rights lawyer, Edmund, the question is like, why do you think, using criminal law to criminalize a publication or disseminating of misinformation is a bad thing?
There are two reasons. One, in Malaysia, we have more than sufficient laws to deal with issues that pertain to expression and speech. We have a lot of provisions in the penal code. And in fact, if we look at when the internet was actually established, the whole regime was actually established. Section 233 and 211 were actually provisions to stop mass marketing campaigns by companies. So the intention was to stop telcos, for example, sending you hundreds of SMSs in a month, asking you to sign up to something, asking you to take a loan, or banks asking you to take facilities. So the idea was to stop that kind of harassment, that kind of annoyance. But now 233 has been used the wrong way. and we have seen how it's been used. There's so much analysis on it. The previous Pakatan Harapan government promised to look into it and repeal it, but did not and could not do that. We also have, and remember, we also have the Printing Presses Publications Act, which actually already criminalizes false news. It's not fake news. It's false news. It was in 1984 that it was enacted. It is not good law in a sense that I do not agree with that law, but I'm using that as a comparison because even in that law, 1984, when you want to prosecute somebody for false news, the prosecution has to show that the false news was being spread maliciously. There's an element of malice in spreading that false news. Compared to the current emergency ordinance, which allows for the crime of fake news, the element of malice need not required to be shown by the prosecution. If you remember, I think the most high-profile case was the late Irene Fernandez's case, where she had actually sent out information on how detention camps were in Malaysia, immigration camps were in Malaysia, how badly the detainees were being treated. And she was prosecuted under the Printing Presses Publications Act for so-called maliciously spreading those false news. So I'm saying that there is enough laws. We should look at how these laws are being implemented, not having new laws. But I think the second point, and we've always said this, you do not stop free speech. You do not stop expression. If you have issues like COVID, you have issues for public discussion, you counter news or you counter information with more expression and more news, and let it be in the marketplace of ideas for people to decide what is something that they want to rely on or not. Back to you, Nalini.
Thanks, Edmund. Thank you so much for the explanation. Just a reminder for journalists who have joined, please feel free to put your questions in the chat box, or you can ask during the Q&A as well. But feel free to put any questions that you have. Whoever's joined, please feel free to start a discussion in the chat group as well. So we will address that later on. I'm coming to Stephen. Stephen, how could this law negatively impact independent news outlets, journalists, or civil society, and in the lead up to elections? And we can foresee elections coming up, maybe not this year or next year, but how do you see this impact on media, for example?
Thank you, Nalini. As Edmund has already said, we have a slew of restrictive laws in Malaysia. Last time I checked, I think we have a couple of dozen of laws that directly or indirectly impinge on press freedom and freedom of expression. So I guess, with another law being thrown into the mix does not really change the way we work as journalists. To be brutally honest, we take it as just another hurdle that we have to overcome to carry out our task. There's already so many hurdles there, so this is just another one. No doubt, I think the anti-fake news law gives the government another level of control over, and it's not just the media alone, but it's also a way for them to controlling activists, political dissidents, the civil society, and especially social media users. But I think where there is repression, there will also be resistance, and I think Fahmi is an excellent example, and he's an inspiration to many of us Malaysians. And while I think it is a little harder to cow hardened activists like Fahmi and also independent media organizations such as Malaysia Kini, it may not be the case with social media users. Despite the many failings of social media, and I think there's a long list of that. We'll leave it to another discussion, but it's nevertheless a powerful, a really powerful tool for people to express themselves and to mobilize public opinion. This is what the government fear most. But I think, the people, as always, will always find, creative ways of to circumvent such restrictions and repression. So I guess, I am optimistic, though of course, situation is getting harder and harder, and it's getting worse and worse, and more laws are being, being implemented in order to control our freedom of speech, our right to express ourselves. But I think, Malaysians will, as always, will find ways to overcome, whatever restrictions there are. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Stephen. Thanks for spreading that optimism and good spirit to everyone here. So for me, I'm coming back to you again. I would like to hear more from you. How did your work create debate or discourse in the country? And how do you think the problematic laws can impact, again, the debate and your work from requesting accountability from the government?
Yeah, I think through my graphics, graphic design, posters and visuals and graphics are powerful medium of communication, and especially in the age of social media, it's so much easier for me to highlight and expose, corruption and wrongdoing and abuse of power using, my graphics to communicate directly to people on social media. And I think with all this, act of police intimidation and arrest and suppression, I think it's gonna create a culture of fear, a chilling effect on everyday citizens, from talking about these issues, from exposing the corruption and abuse of power of the government and the people in power. Yeah, only the few who are brave enough that is willing to resist and fight back and speak out. So I think it's not going to be good, when we have a culture of censorship and self-censorship, because in Malaysia right now, most people are still afraid, to criticize or make fun of those people in power and political satire. In Malaysia, it's a much more dangerous game over here. You can get yourself arrested, sentenced to prison for satire. Imagine that. But that's Malaysia right now.
Thanks, Fahmi. Wachila, I want to hear your opinion. Like, we can see that beyond this ordinance, the other laws, including Sedition, Communication and Multimedia Act, and computer crimes related laws are being abused to curtail freedom of expression. To what extent do developments in Southeast Asia also impact Malaysia and vice versa, like whatever happening in Malaysia, how it could impact other countries? And yeah,
thanks. So the two, first, what we need to look at would be certain developments which resonate, across all Southeast Asian countries. One is the infodemic. Second would be the proliferation of disinformation, hate speech, online gender-based violence. Yeah, and this is, the threshold might be different, but this is very common, not just in the region, I would say globally as well. But what we have in common in this region is the concept of ASEAN brotherhood, yeah, where they tend to adopt a somewhat similar approach to mainly, I would say, human rights issues, yeah. And if we look at it in three different areas, one is the political turmoil that we are seeing, and relatedly the human rights violations, right? Aside from what's happening here in Malaysia, we have the coup in Myanmar, we have authoritarian-like practices in Philippines, that's all leading to prosecutions, persecutions, and other forms of human rights violations. We also see another pattern, or a common threshold, which is the continued use of repressive laws to criminalize expression. Yeah. So not just in Malaysia, in Singapore, we have the Protection from Online Falsehood and Manipulation Act. Yeah. Of course, in Thailand, we have the La Majesté law. In Myanmar, there are attempts to, blackout telecommunications, internet blockades, and so forth. Obviously, the other countries like Cambodia, Laos, and Vietnam also has different forms of laws that are being used to curtail expression online, right? And then we have this added intersecting element of the pandemic, which is contributing to two things. One, it is because the countries and the different states are overwhelmed in mitigating the pandemic, there is some levels of silence, or and silence often can also amount to complicity, right? So there's less critical voices, even in the context of Myanmar. We would have expected more of or stronger voices and stronger interventions from Southeast Asian states, at least through the ASEAN mechanism. Then we also have the pandemic now being used as the reason to justify the use of these laws and the use of other severe measures to curtail expressions online and offline too. So the dynamics are quite common. Sometimes it's almost like having the same models of laws being replicated across the different countries. And the worrying trend here is that the relationship amongst the Southeast Asian countries can also reflect Malaysia's participation, for example, at the global level. Yeah. So the commitments then, this Malaysia's quest, to become a member of the Human Rights Council, and the upcoming, or rather very diluted pledges that they have made are not convincing enough. But because of the development in the region, as a bloc, there's a high possibility that they are going to get elected. So these trends are common. These trends are also contributing to a situation where things are not necessarily going to change through, further, how would I say, intervention. I mean, I wouldn't say intervention, ASEAN don't really intervene, but for further response that are progressive from other countries. Yeah. So yeah, so that's how we are looking at it. If I may, just 1 minute, just Nalini. And this also, I mean, what I would say is how these also manifest in media freedom, because media is often, the first to be targeted, right? You target and you silence media. If you see what's happening in Philippines, and if you're seeing what's happening in Malaysia, even to a large extent in Indonesia, and of course Myanmar is at a completely different level altogether. Yeah. So this is the context, and yes, Malaysia definitely fits itself very comfortably within this context.
Thank you so much, Watsila, and thank you everyone for sharing. And I would just like to, before we wrap up, I would like to give 2 to 3 minutes to each panelist to just what is the future of freedom of speech and expression in Malaysia. I would like to start with Stephen. Stephen, you have to unmute yourself.
Sorry. Well, it's a good question. I think given the political landscape in Malaysia, where really, we are going through a culture war, so to speak, just like in the United States, where we are split right in the middle, and there is no one political party that can, or any one political coalition that can actually has, a stable political power. I think you're going to see a lot more restrictions. Looking ahead, I don't even think that the next general election will be able to resolve the kind of uncertainties that we are facing right now, with no political parties being able to come out on top, to really claim that they have the majority of support among Malaysians. We are, as I say, split in all different ways. And given that you're going to have weaker government, they're going to feel a lot more threatened, and because of that, you see more restrictive laws being implemented. But I'm in the long term, I'm positive. I think When Malaysia Kini started 20 years ago, Mahathir was in power, and he was, definitely someone who does not broke any dissent. At that time, we never even thought that there would be a change of government. I myself do not think that I would see a change of government in my own lifetime. So I think, in that sense, we see some progression there. That eventually leading to a change of government. Unfortunately, that did not last. But I'm confident that if Malaysians continue to work together, find ways to overcome whatever problems that we're facing, whatever the problems that the government is throwing at us. We'll be able to prevail again. So I think in that sense, in long term, eventually we shall win again.
Thank you so much, Stephen. Edmund.
I think that the efforts to curtail and censor speech and expression will always fail. There will be many attempts, and we see it today, but with the internet now being quite free and so free, the government can do whatever it wants, but there will always be spaces and ways and different means to express ourselves. With COVID, of course, we do not see a lot of expression on the street as much as we see it before, but we can see from what Malaysia Kini is doing and what Fahmi is doing, these efforts will go a long way towards encouraging people and inciting people towards more expression and speech. I think the future is really to start creating or continue to create resistance writers. I think in Malaysia, there are not enough resistant writers. This was what Lawyer Brooke tried to do at that time to get around.
Hello, Edmund. Are you there?
And we felt that when Lawyer Brooke started, and to where the different mediums of expression. So the point I think is, and what Fahmi is doing is really good because it's inciting a whole new generation of resistance through arts, through writing, and this I think is the future. So we as lawyers, CSOs, we can only support, we can only do what we can in terms of advocacy, but the frontliners are the people like Fahmi that we will always back, we will always defend Stephen and Malaysia Kini, because we know what is right. So it's not a question of that we will win. We are actually winning. The only question, so I disagree. Stephen said we will win one day. It's not that we will win one day. We are winning. It just depends on how you see it. And I can say from spending 3 years inside government, a lot of expression and speech, when you stand inside government, there is a lot of fear inside government from what happens outside. And this is something that they have to deal with, but this is something that is also on our shoulders to continue the pressure and the advocacy. Thank you, Nalin.
Thanks, Edmund. Wachala.
Yeah, I would also, like Stephen and Edmund, take a positive spin to what's actually happening now. Government's action is actually leading to, or rather encouraging the lay person to occupy more of the spaces, especially online spaces, to voice their dissent, right? We have also, and it's allowing us and giving us the space to mobilize more voices. So from the layperson to the youth, we are also seeing more resistance slowly, but yet as what Edmund said, because of the pandemic, it's small, but there are resistance through protests as well, both led by FOE groups, but as well as youth groups. So this is really at times of critical times like this, we are seeing more of people wanting to act, and it's sparkling more conversation and debate, despite the attempts by the government to silence us. People are acting, and I think we are really encouraged by that, and we will continue to ensure that these voices have the space and the necessary protection to move forward.
Thank you so much, Varshala. Fahmi, let's hear from our icon.
I think we should stop being afraid of the government, and I think we should start exercising our right, to freedom of speech and expression, clearly stated under Article 10 of our federal constitution, and be prepared to be arrested, for speaking out, for expressing yourself. Last Saturday, I conducted a Zoom workshop for 13 graphic designers, training them what to do if you get arrested by police, educating them about all the different sections that are, usually being used against graphic designers like us, the Decision Act, Communication and Multimedia Act, Section 504, 505B of the Penal Code, and also training them what to say to the police if they get investigated, and preparing themselves to be arrested. And I think this is one way for us to and basically people need to know their rights. Yeah, that we have the right to expression, to free speech. Yeah, and if they want to arrest us, arrest us. We're not going to be afraid. So take a stand and prepared to be arrested. To defend our right to freedom of speech and expression.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for all your contributions and your idea. Is there any questions from the journalists or anyone here? Feel free to ask to any of the panelists, or if you have any opinion that you want to share, feel free to share. Anyone? Any volunteers?
Hi, can I just jump in? So hi, my name is Devi and I'm Asia Pacific Council for Access Now. We just wanted to say that today we released with Access Now Article 19, CIJ and Civicus, a joint statement on these issues, and I'm just going to post it in the link there, and I would encourage you to share that as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Devi. Any questions from anyone? Raman? I was told that you have a question. Yes, Raman. Carry on. We can't hear you, Raman.
Can you hear me now? Perfect. Apologies for that. I was going to say, I'm Ramanji Singh Chima from Access Now, but the question I wanted to ask was something that press colleagues in Malaysia and covering Malaysia have asked me. And which was that if you had literally just, and this is particularly to Edmund, Fahmi, as well as Stephen, or also Varshala, if there was one thing that you had, that you would have Malaysian lawmakers or judges do, note I'm not saying government ministers, but if there's one thing you had MPs or judges do in regards to the current press freedom situation in Malaysia over the next 2 to 3 months, what would that be? I'm just curious on what you think some of these institutional actors in Parliament and in the judiciary could do in order to make the situation better.
Anyone want to take up that?
Yeah, maybe I can answer that. I think the demand from the lawyer side was when Pakatan Harapan took over government, and this is what they did for some cases, is actually to review all the cases that have been initiated by the Attorney General under these repressive laws. One. Number two, look at the laws, of course, to repeal or at least to amend them. And I think if the Muhyiddin government wants to, how would you say, curry favor with certain groups of people, then this is definitely something which could be looked at in terms of human rights. I also want to add that what Stephen said about a multi-party government, a weak government after elections, is actually a good thing. It's a good thing that we have a weak government. And if we accept that it is a weak government, then what has happened all the many years of different democracy movements that has led to a weak government is a good thing, because this is what we need. We need a weak government, and expression and speech, going out to vote, is something that may have caused this or could have caused this. So it's a good thing that we're a weak government, Stephen. I don't understand why you are saying, but I know why you're saying that. It's because you have a weak government, then of course there will be more persecution. But I think we should continue to have a weak government, and all the efforts that civil society is doing should be contributing to having a weaker government. Thank you.
Thank you, Edmund. I might disagree with that, but I leave it to the panelists. Anyone else want to respond? Yes, Stephen.
Can I just jump in? In some ways, I do agree with you. I think, you wouldn't want to have a government that is so, it is complete control of, doesn't fear about, being thrown out of power, by in an election, whatever it is. And that's the case. And of course, there is a chance for them to abuse their power. And that is something that we have seen, until recently, with Barisan Nasional, having almost complete control over everything. But I think, my thinking is in terms of the fact that if you look at Pakatan Harapan, it was, consider, something that is considered an improvement and all that. And there is actually an attempt there to bring about some measure of reforms, perhaps not as far as, some of us may have hoped, but at least, there is talk about reforming, repealing some of the restrictive laws, amending some of the other laws, and also for the media side, also in terms of setting up a media council so that the industry itself can actually, regulate itself, rather than, the government stepping in all the time and trying to, control the media. That if there's any, any complaints or any unhappiness about our reporting, there is actually an independent mechanism there that is, that can actually handle those complaints, rather than, people going to the government and say, look, you're supposed to punish, you have to punish these guys for overstepping, whatever it is, and they've been forced to, implement, certain laws in order to control the media. So I think in that sense, there were some attempts there. However, of course, unfortunately, they didn't last long enough to bring about, meaningful reforms. And that's what I meant, really. I think, the weak government, but hopefully a weak government that actually can last, last, long enough to be able for them to implement some measure of reforms. Thanks.
Thank you, Stephen. Anyone else have any questions or anything?
Yeah, can I answer a little bit?
Yes, Fahmi.
Mhm.
Yeah. So when I got arrested, for last month, one of the police report was actually made by an MP from the ruling coalition. So I think besides repealing Section 233 of the Communications and Multimedia Act, I think our MPs, should, have a good sense of humor and stop treating, any forms of political satire and parody against them as an act of sedition and defamation. Stop criminalizing satire and parody.
Thank you. And Wachala?
I think there are two things, right? If we are looking at the judiciary, it will be, I think it's timely now for, the Malaysian judiciary to really adopt judicial activism. We've seen the ups and downs with just the decisions that, even the federal courts come up with just the last few months, right? We are actually more inspired with what's happening in other countries. Just looking at, say, for example, the Madras High Court decision, which bans conversion therapy. And the language is so progressive, and the statements being made there is so progressive. And if that is a way forward for Malaysia, I mean, even saying things like ignorance is no justification for normalizing any form of discrimination, I think it's already a stepping stone, for our judiciary. That's one. Now, to add on to what Stephen said about the need for Malaysian Media Council, it's actually very crucial, because the state now has complete powers over regulation of media. Yeah. And we have two sets of laws based on distribution mechanisms, right? We have, as what Edmund said, PPPA, and we also have the Communications and Multimedia Act. So having a media council means that it will be an independent self-regulatory mechanism. Now, if we can actually get our parliament to, the suspension of parliament to be lifted and they reconvene, one of the things that we really hope that they'll put on the, and I say this very cautiously as well, right? We don't want this to be used as a tool by the current government, but one thing that we hope they will prioritize is to get the legislation moving, because there was already a pro tem committee established last year who's come up with their report, and they've already also submitted a draft bill for the Media Council. I think that would be a crucial way forward to ensure, better standards for media, as well as better regulation and more independence in its regulation of media.
Great, thank you so much. Is there any other questions or anything? We have shared our press releases and the joint statement. And once the YouTube video is available, I'll send around to all the media as well. That will be perfect for reporting tomorrow, I hope. If there's no more questions and comments, thank you so much to all the panelists. I'm really happy that we had this discussion, and thank you, Edmund, thank you, Stephen, Wachala, and Fahmi for joining us, and really great to have this positive spirit in the midst of pandemic. So but stay negative in your in terms of your health. Stay safe, and thank you so much, Fahmi, for reminding all of us that don't stop expressing yourself, and be brave when you want to speak up. With that note, thank you so much for everyone who joined. See you again, and have a good RightsCon event until the end. Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye.